Normally at this stage you start by saying I'll be brief because we've had many contributions and I won't repeat what other people have said, but actually on this occasion I am going to repeat a lot of what other people have said. But to start with what Christopher says, to start on the positive note before I get on to the critical note, I still firmly believe that a good TTIP would be good for jobs in Europe, would be good for our growth, and would establish the EU and the US as global standard setters. And if we don't set ourselves as global standard setters in a decade or 20 years' time, we'll be global standard followers. So I still strongly believe in a good TTIP. I think the work you've done in the draft document is excellent. And I just think we have to bear in mind that in this report, we're going to be aiming at 3, possibly 4 different audiences. I'm not saying the message should be different for each of them, but we need to understand that we're trying to convey important messages to different people at this time. Firstly, to the US, I think we have to be very clear that we, as politically, back some of the Commission's ambitions and give Ignacio a stronger hand when he's negotiating with his counterpart in the United States. For example, on public procurement, we have to, as your document rightly says, we have to be very clear that Buy America is not compatible with a US-EU free trade agreement. We have to make it clear to the Americans that we still strongly believe in geographical indicators and we expect them to be part of the agreement, even though they're still pushing back very hard against that. We have to say to both the Commission and the US that although, and I'll come on to regular convergence shortly, although that's important, we shouldn't forget that high tariff peaks, and again your document says this, that high tariff peaks are still a serious problem for some commodities, and I keep using the example of Scottish textiles, where several very high tariff peaks makes it almost impossible for Scottish companies to export to the United States. But we also have to say to Ignacio and his colleagues, again, others have said, Helmut said this, you've said it in the document, that we cannot accept anything in TTIP that limits our ability to regulate in the public interest. That would not be acceptable, and we cannot give that away in the negotiations. We also have to make it clear that we expect any agreement, again, despite the pushback from the US, to contain a serious and enforceable sustainable development chapter, particularly the ILO Convention. Again, you've mentioned this, and I'm just reiterating much of what's in the document, but we have to make sure that the institutions get that message. And to public opinion, I think we have to say this resolution, when we draft a final resolution, has to say we've heard, notwithstanding what we've just heard from Christopher, we have heard your concerns about investor-state dispute. Because although it's easy to dismiss the 147,000 people who opposed ISDS as just clicking a button, the fact is 147,000 citizens felt strong enough to click that button, even if that's all they were doing. And that's much more response than we've had to any other Commission or European Union public consultation. So we can't lightly dismiss this, and our document has to make it very clear that we take into account their concerns. Similarly, as others have said, we have to do the same with services. There can be no threat to public services as a result of TTIP. And regular convergence, again, as Yannick and others have already said in this debate, regular convergence must be in an upward direction, not a downward direction, and it's not regulatory harmonisation we're looking for, it's convergence that we're looking for. And finally, and this is where I do disagree with Christopher, my fourth audience is the Council. Because actually, we've now been discussing TTIP for 15, 18 months. The Council must get the message that the original negotiating mandate was not thought out as well as it could have been. Now, I'm not asking them to rewrite the negotiating mandate, but I think there's at least an argument for the Council to debate the negotiating mandate, to see if they can tweak that mandate and give Ignacio a better hand to play with when he negotiates with the Americans. I repeat, I think a good TTIP would be good for Europe, it would also be good for the United States, but the message at the end of this resolution has to be very clear. If the European Parliament does not think we've got a good deal at the end of the day, we will reject it, and the Commission has to remember what happened with ACTA and other agreements. We cannot simply say, as I hear some people in the Commission say, not Ignacio himself, not to be fair, but I've heard other people inside DG Trade who say, but at the end of the day, if we get a TTIP agreement, you'll never reject it, because it would be such a nuclear bomb to reject such an agreement. Well, don't make that assumption. Make sure you listen to our concerns and take them into account in the final negotiations.